Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Brown, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Peter Van Valkenburg, and I'm the Director of Research at Coin Center, an independent nonprofit focused on the public policy issues affecting cryptocurrency and public blockchain networks. What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is the world's first cryptocurrency, and it works because of the world's first public blockchain network. What does Bitcoin do? It's simple. It lets you send and receive value to and from anyone in the world using nothing more than a computer and an internet connection. Now, why is it revolutionary? Because unlike every other tool for sending money over the internet, it works without the need to trust a middleman. The lack of any corporation in between means that Bitcoin is the world's first public digital payments infrastructure. And by public, I simply mean available to all and not owned by any single entity. Now, we have public infrastructure for information, for websites, for email. It's called the internet. But the only public payments infrastructure that we have is cash, as in paper money. And it only works in face-to-face transactions. Before Bitcoin, if you wanted to pay someone remotely over the phone or the internet, then you could not use public infrastructure. You would rely on a private bank to open their books and add a ledger entry that debits you and credits the person you're paying. And if you both don't use the same bank, well, then there'll be multiple banks and multiple ledger entries in between. With Bitcoin, the ledger is the public blockchain, and anyone can add an entry to that ledger, transferring their Bitcoins to someone else. And anyone, regardless of their nationality, race, religion, gender, sex, or creditworthiness, can for absolutely no cost create a Bitcoin address in order to receive payments digitally. Bitcoin is the world's first globally accessible public money. Is it perfect? No. Neither was email when it was invented in 1972. Bitcoin's not the best money on every margin. It's not yet accepted everywhere. It's not used often to quote prices, and it's not always a stable store of value. But it is working, and the mere fact that it works without trusted intermediaries is amazing. It's a computer science breakthrough, and it will be as significant for freedom, prosperity, and human flourishing as the birth of the internet. And Bitcoin is just the beginning. If we can replace private payments infrastructure, then we can replace other private choke points to human interaction as well. Now, why should we want to build more public infrastructure? Why should we embrace blockchains over corporate intermediaries? Why should we tolerate their inefficiencies and work to make them better? Why should we want the pioneers of this technology here in the United States and not fleeing overseas? A simple reason. Because the corporate intermediaries providing today's critical but privately owned infrastructure are becoming fewer, larger, and more powerful, and their failures are increasingly grave. So roughly half of all Americans, 143 million people, had their Social Security numbers exposed to hackers because of a breach at Equifax. The SWIFT network has relayed hundreds of millions of dollars in fraudulent transactions because of hacked member banks in Bangladesh, Vietnam, Ecuador, and Russia. The FBI suspects now that the largest of these hacks was perpetrated by North Korea. Corrupt, low-level employees at an Indian bank, Punjab National, were able to fraudulently certify SWIFT messages, stealing $1.8 billion. It's the largest electronic bank robbery in history. In fact, it's the largest bank robbery in history. In October 2016, an estimated 1.2 million internet-connected devices were hacked and turned into a botnet that for several hours made prominent websites unavailable across Europe and North America, including CNN and Fox News, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Increasingly, physical machines are being connected to the internet to augment their capabilities. They're wired through servers that are owned and maintained by private and trusted intermediaries, the so-called Internet of Things. Pacemakers from St. Jude's Hospital have been hacked. Baby monitors from TrendNet have been hacked. And Jeeps from Jeep have been hacked to the point where they can be remotely commandeered and driven off the road. Now, those vulnerabilities are inescapable in systems that have single points of failure. It doesn't matter if the point of failure is a corporation or if it's a government. There shouldn't be a single point of failure. Similar choke points existed before the internet. If you wanted to deliver a message, you'd have to go through one of 3 television broadcasters or a handful of newspapers. Private corporations are essential, but no critical infrastructure should rely on 1 or 2. The internet removed single points of failure in communications infrastructure and ushered in a wave of competition among new media corporations building on top of its public rails. Blockchains can similarly disintermediate critical payments and IoT infrastructure. The technology is not yet ready to answer all of those questions today, but it is our best hope. And as with the internet in the 1990s, we need a light-touch, pro-innovation policy to ensure that these innovations flourish in America for the benefit and security of all Americans.
My name is Nuri Rubini. I'm a professor of economics at New York University. I'm an expert of the global economy, of asset and credit bubbles, and of financial crises. In summary, my view on this ecosystem are as follows. First, crypto is the mother or father of all scams and bubbles, a bubble that has finally gone bust this year. Second, blockchain is the most overhyped technology ever and is no better than a glorified database. Let me elaborate on these points. First, a recent study shows that 81% of all ICOs were scams to begin with, 11% of them have been failing or are dead, and only 8% are still traded on exchanges. Second, after a massive bubble in 2017, Bitcoin has fallen by 70% this year. Other major cryptocurrencies have fallen by 80%, and thousands of other ones have fallen by 95%. This entire asset class is literally imploding now. Just yesterday, major cryptocurrencies plunged another 10% in a day. Third, these assets are not currencies. Calling them cryptocurrencies, nonsense. They're not a unit of account. They're not a means of payment. They're not a stable store of value. Bitcoin can do only 5 transactions per second. Visa can do 25,000 per second. Nobody's using Bitcoin for transactions apart from criminals and terrorists. Crypto mining is also an environmental disaster as the system wastes massive amounts of energy. Fourth, there is a revolution in financial services, but it has nothing to do with blockchain or crypto. It is called fintech and is based on a combination of AI, big data, and Internet of Things. And it's already being used daily by billions of people for billions of financial transactions. There is no blockchain in fintech. Fifth, the crypto ideological utopia is a libertarian dream of full decentralization of all human transactions. No governments, no central banks, no corporation, no banks, no trusted institutions. It's totally utter nonsense. Sixth, crypto land is now subject to the opposite and dangerous trend, massive centralization. Mining is centralized and controlled by oligopolies in authoritarian countries like China and Russia. Trading is centralized as 99% of all transactions occur on non-secure centralized exchanges that are being hacked on a daily basis. Development is centralized as a technological elite is police, prosecutor, and judge. They arbitrarily change the code and fork coins into new ones when things go wrong. And wealth is massively concentrated in crypto land. The Gini coefficient of inequality for Bitcoin is worse than North Korea. It's quite an achievement. Seventh, there is massive price manipulation in crypto land, widespread pump and dump schemes, spoofing, wash trading, insider trading, coins like Tether that are created by fiat and used to manipulate upward prices. Massive criminality. 8, ICOs associated with security tokens are non-compliant securities that break all security laws. They are mostly scams, and even the SEC created a fake website to warn investors of such initial coin scams. 9, utility tokens and widespread tokenization would mean a return to the Stone Age of barter. Even the Flintstones knew better than crypto, as they used clamshells as their own one currency. 10th and final point, corporate blockchains and so-called enterprise DLT are glorified databases and have nothing to do with blockchain. They're private rather than public. They're permissioned rather than permissionless. They're based on trusted authorities verifying transactions rather than being trustless. They're not distributed on millions of computers, but rather on a few selected controlled ledgers or databases. They don't use cryptographic games to authenticate transactions, but rather trusted permission authorities. In summary, they claim to be blockchain, but they have nothing to do with blockchain. And 90% of all corporations experimenting with them have decided that they are no better than traditional databases. And since they are more costly and less efficient than databases, they will not use them. Only 1% of all CIOs say that there will be any adoption of DLT in their organization, and 80% of all CIOs have no interest in this technology. It's no wonder, as no organization, government, corporation, or bank would ever want to put on a public, permissionless, distributed, trustless ledger all of its transactions with customers and suppliers. It doesn't make sense, and it's not going to happen. So blockchain is a lot of hype and almost no reality, as an expert senior analyst recently concluded. Thank you for your interest, and I'm happy to answer any question you might have.